Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. It's the last day of June. I don't know if that's good or bad. There's a sign that this year is going by way too fast. So, but today we have Yarona, right, here
Yeah.
with us, and she's gonna really, she's got a lot of good information that's gonna help a lot of people who parenting. Um, I would like to know, although I'm no longer a parent, um, still, it's good to have that knowledge and to learn and stuff like that. So she's going to share her story, her experience, and how that impacted or motivate her and encourage her to do what she's doing now in the power of parenting and other exciting things. And she's got. Did you ready to do that seminar? Or it's about ready to start.
The Evolution of Parenting podcast is going. My program that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be launching that in January, and I'm actually writing a book right now.
So am I.
It's a parenting book. It's called
Okay.
Unspoken Signals: Essential Parenting Skills to Raise Emotionally Secure Children.
Yes, good. That sounds wonderful. And that's going to be a book of knowledge and a lot of skills
And
and things
stories.
it's going to teach us, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, Ivana's going to share us her story and
Yep.
her experience, excuse me, and why she does all this to help the community, not just her family, but the community around her, maybe even her church, whoever wants to come in and learn.
Yep.
Um, this thing and she'll tell us more about it in this podcast. So I want to welcome everybody to Unplugged Grief Ministries podcast. This is a podcast of education. I do bring in a lot of coaches that this season that we're gonna use the season of not just stories, but the season of teaching and educating. So, um, Joanna, I'm gonna mute myself
Okay.
as I told you why, and I would probably try to keep myself muted.
Okay.
So you can slap my hand if I forget to put my mute button back on. But sometimes
Okay.
the way my brain works is if I don't say something now, I'm gonna forget what it is.
Yeah.
So guess what? I've learned to take notes, paper,
That's great.
pencil, pen, because that way it will help me. Jotting it down does help my memory a big time. I'm so
Excellent.
excited you're here, and I'm hoping that in the future,
Hmm.
after today, that you can come back and maybe do a part two, part three, part
Yep.
four.
Sure.
Because there's always new information to learn. The
Always.
life is a school. We learn every day something new. So I'm
Right.
excited you're here. I'm excited you're here to encourage us, to motivate us, to inspire us, and all the goodies that come along with that. So I'm going to mute myself, and Ivana, you have the floor. Have fun, and everybody sit back, enjoy, take notes, but listen because something in here may be the answer that some of us are looking for, you know? So,
All right, so I will start with my name, which is always confusing to people. It's Yarona Boster, and it's actually Hebrew. It means she shall sing. It's a tongue twister. Um, so my journey started probably from my inception, but I'll fast forward first and tell you why I am now a advanced certified life coach. So I experienced a lot of loss in my life. Um, Over the course of a number of years, it started out with my niece being born with a severe disability, and then my nephew being born a few years later, also with a disability. We didn't realize it was so rare that um, they didn't even know what it was. And I stepped into the world of early childhood as a result. And I found myself immersed in this world of parents. What was interesting at the same time was that my family was going through a lot with my father, who ended up with cancer. And then as the years progressed, um, I started to have infertility struggles. And then my niece passed away. And in the span of a number of years, it was my niece passed away, then my father's cancer returned, and I took care of him until his death. And he passed. And then I kept having infertility struggles. And then um, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and then I took care of her, and she passed. And then most recently, this past February, I lost a man who we always called each other brother and sister because we were raised together from infancy. And so I lost him to cancer as well. And it's interesting that when we make ourselves a part of a world, it doesn't necessarily mean that world isn't going to affect us. So loss affects, in my mind, everybody. Loss is, in fact, the one guarantee in life. But what I noticed interestingly was that at the same time as my professional world, I was working with children in the world of disabilities and developmental delays, and with parents for those children, birth to 3. I was experiencing all this loss, and I started to see the interconnection between loss and parenting. I saw a dynamic shift in the parenting styles of people, if you will. I started to see that parents who there used to be a lot of authoritarian parenting, the do as I say because I'm your parent and because I told you so, and that I have the authority over you, to this style of permissive parenting where parents wanted to be their children's friends and they want to give them everything and they want to just love on them, which is beautiful. Unconditional love needs to be a part of the parent-child relationship. However, there is space for both unconditional love and boundaries. And what I started to see was that not enough parents were giving their children the right guidance. They were allowing them to do whatever they wanted with no accountability, no discernment on what was okay and what was not okay. And as a result, there was a different level of people being born into the world. And the thing that scared me the most, because of all my experiences with loss, was that I saw these parents disabling their children's capacity to process and accept loss and move on successfully in life. And it hurt my heart because I saw all these parents who were trying to the best of their ability to do what they thought was right, which was just pour all this love on their children. But they were also sheltering them from life's natural losses. And I started to develop this theory called what I call foundational losses. And foundational losses are essentially that children, human beings, because the truth is we all were children once, right? There's not one single human being you can talk to who just suddenly appeared in the world as an adult. But humans, when they're young, when they're little, they go through these little losses. Usually, sometimes big and significant losses occur, but generally speaking, the losses are small. The loss of a toy because it broke, favorite toy. It's broke, it's gone. They'll never get that exact same toy back. The parent can replace it, but it's not quite the same, right? Then the losses get more complex as we grow. The loss of a good grade, even though you studied hard, not getting into the, sports team, not getting into the sports team, not getting into the after school program you wanted, not getting into the college you want, not getting the job you want, losing a job, losing a relationship. All of these foundational losses inevitably lead to the unavoidable loss, which is the loss of a loved one. And what I saw was that if you help your child, not by trying to shelter them from those losses and take away those losses from them, but by giving them the tools and the strategies and the skills they need to develop to handle those losses themselves, then your child is much more set up for the ability to move on successfully in life. And one thing that I tend to ask all of the parents that I work with these days is I say this to them. What is the one thing as a parent that you want to know before you're gone? And most parents will say, well, I want to know my child's going to be okay without me. Before you leave this world, what is the one thing you want to know? My child will be okay. They'll be able to live. They'll be happy. They'll be, secure. They'll be successful. All of these things. So I tell parents, well, then you need to start with that end goal in mind. Everything you do needs to set them up for success, not by handing them the success, but by handing them the tools and the strategies that they can use to move forward in life without you. And that's how I melded that. And I started to see that one of the core components to that was emotional security. If you raise an emotionally resilient, emotionally secure child, they will learn how to be okay without you. It won't be easy. Loss is never easy. And here's the thing. The truth is, it's painful regardless. Regardless of how ready you feel for it, it doesn't matter. You are in for a world of hurt. I'm going to be quite honest. No matter what, I will say that with the experience with my father and my mother specifically, because I was their primary caregiver until the very end, I knew the end was coming. I was as prepared as I could be. Yet I still fell apart because I needed to. Because there are 3 things in life that you can guarantee as a human being. You have thoughts and you have emotions and you have behaviors. There is no wrong thought or wrong emotion. There are no bad thoughts or emotions. There are only poor behaviors and poor behavior choices. So you can feel what you feel and you can think what you want to think, but you need to ultimately behave in the way that aligns with who you want to be integrally. And I think that what I started to see is that parents would belittle their children's emotional needs. When a child hurts themselves, some parent might go in and go, "Oh, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay," trying to make them stop crying as quickly as possible. Maybe give them something, a treat or a toy, or bribe them with something. Or they're angry and they're screaming in the middle of the store and, I don't want them to do that, so I'm just going to try to figure out a way to shut them up as quickly as I can, and here's a good way. I'll hand them a tablet or I'll hand them my phone. But the truth is, you're not allowing them to process the emotion they need to process. If you can help them process that emotion, you have a much better ability to help them navigate what coping mechanisms they need to process that emotion. Not just be there as their emotional support system, but actually give them coping mechanisms. And here's a nugget of truth. So there's a statistic that shows that every human being currently living and every human in recorded history that's ever come before us, they've calculated that we are as unique as 1 in 4 trillion. So the uniqueness of that one human being means that you need to create unique strategies or utilize various coping mechanisms until you're finding the strategies that work both for you and for them. The other thing that's very interesting, you hear this a lot. People will say, "Oh, babies are blank slates," but that's not true. We now have the scientific research that shows, enough studies have been done that show that human beings are born with their personality traits, mental health behaviors, and all of those things about 40 to 60% already predetermined in your DNA. So that means parents are always at a deficit because they have to learn their child to be able to figure out with them what works and what doesn't. And the other thing is, people are always growing and changing. So the more growth that happens, it's a constant evolution. That's why the podcast that I have with my co-host, Robert Hulse, is called The Evolution of Parenting, because the role of parenting never stops, but it does change. Because if you're a parent to an adult child, you're still a parent. If you had a child that passed, you're still a parent. You will never not have been that role. And your child will always be your child, even if you're in your 90s and they're in their 70s. So there is always that dynamic. It's just that it's ever evolving. So we need to understand and unpack all of that to be able to change with that. And the interesting thing about change is that it's not just change on a plodding course. It is an exponential change that multiplies over time. So what's very interesting is if you bring in coping skills and coping mechanisms early on, you have a better ability to teach your child to evaluate if a coping skill isn't working for them any longer. Let's say at 5, they were able to, do deep breathing to get themselves calm from being angry. But at 7, they find the deep breathing doesn't work anymore and they need to sit down and read a book. What happens is you start to help build a child who knows how to self-evaluate and figure that out for themselves. So that is a lot of what I do. And because I really dial in the loss in parenting, I think that people wonder if that's, a healthy way to parent, but it is, because it also keeps you sort of in check. It doesn't mean that your child can't achieve great and amazing success. But one of the things that I keep in mind for myself is that mistakes are inevitable. And I tell this to parents all the time. If you find an expert, especially a parenting expert who says they're an expert and they never make mistakes and they know everything, all the tips and tricks, run away, because that's not possible. As a human being, we are fallible. That means we make mistakes all the time. Our emotions can get the best of us. Even people who are so emotionally well controlled, your emotions can still get the best of you on any given day. We are human. We are born to make mistakes and try to course correct. That is the nature of things. If we can't learn from our own mistakes and try to do better for ourselves and for those around us, then what are we doing here, essentially? And that's how I feel as a parent. I really try to focus in on understanding and getting parents to really feel that it's okay to own your mistakes. The other thing about owning your mistakes in front of your children and with your children is that, this is really key, you humanize yourself to your child. Because psychologically, here's what happens. When an infant is born, they are this wee little thing compared to this big person who's caring for their needs. They are literally helpless and reliant completely on the person taking care of them. And what happens is they look up to them, both figuratively and literally. And when they look up to you, they're like, my parent can do no wrong. And so even when the parent is doing something, even potentially tragically wrong, really, really bad choices, they're trying to make sense of it and they're trying to justify it. Well, this person, they take care of me. So even if they're, God forbid, abusing me or something like that, there must be something wrong with me for not understanding why this feels wrong. So when we as parents say, I made a mistake, or, oh no, I have to fix this, or something like that, all of these things in front of our children allow us to equalize the playing field so that it's a mutual respect. And that's what should be happening. Because here's the thing, as a parent, you don't own your child. They don't belong to you. They are their own autonomous person. That means that with their own autonomy, they're going to make choices for themselves that you may not necessarily want them to make. But your choices are yours to make for yourself. And I don't live by the golden rule. I live by the platinum rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you would want done for yourself. But that implies that what you want for yourself is the same as what somebody else wants for them. And that's not necessarily true. I may want to live in freezing cold weather, and my child may want to live in burning hot heat. I'm not going to force him to live in freezing cold weather because that's what I want. That's what I like. So live by the platinum rule, and it will allow you to see your child as an individual and see the choices that they make are their own to make. And that is one of the most vital things that I can tell you. Start with that autonomous rule and start with the platinum rule. And you can apply that everywhere you live, everywhere you go, all the people that you meet, right? If one person is in pain and grief and suffering, and for you, it would be great for you. If you were in grief and suffering, you'd want to be distracted and taken out and be social. But if that other person doesn't want that, and you're trying to drag them out of their house when all they want to do is stay home and be in the quiet and reflection, and you're imposing upon them what you would want. That's not okay. And grief is a rubber band. I call it the grief rubber band. So I don't believe that grief is a process where a starting and an ending. I believe that grief is a cycle and it's a rubber band. I picture it as a rubber band, as if over time it loses some of its elasticity. It's not as restrictive as it first was when that loss initially hit you. But over time it expands, it loses some of its elasticity, it starts to, just fade a bit. And every once in a while, it could be even decades later, that grief can hit you, can snap back into you as painfully as the very first moment you experienced it. And that's okay. That is okay because you can acknowledge it for yourself. Grief doesn't have an end. There should be nobody telling you, aren't you over it already? That's not okay. That is not okay. It's not right for people to tell you when you should stop grieving. You get to make that choice for yourself. The only thing I can do as a friend or a loved one is say, I have no words. I don't know what to do, but I want to be here for you. So tell me, how can I best support you? And that is the best and greatest thing you can do for somebody. And don't tell them it'll be okay, because I'm going to tell you a story. When my sister called me one morning, I was on my way to work, and my niece had been severely disabled for her entire life, but things had been pretty bad those last months. And she called me that morning. I was driving into work and she's like, we've been in the hospital all night. Things are not good. And I could tell just by the way her voice sounded that things were really, really bad. And I said, okay, I have one meeting and then I'm going to be there. I'll head out to the hospital. By the time I got into my office, I was shaking like a leaf. I was so just a mess. And I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I can't do this. And I dropped my stuff and I said to the person in my office, I'm like, I got to go. I got to go. I can't make the meeting. Please let them know. I've got to run. It's an emergency. And I rushed up to the hospital. When I went into the receptionist, and you could see I was freaking out. I was shaking. And I said, well, I asked her for the information of the room. She gave me the room. And in a pause, in a moment, she looked at me and she said, oh, honey, it'll be okay. And I just looked at her and I left. I rushed up. When I made it to my niece's room, I rushed in and my sister said, stop, do not come in here if you can't handle this. And I looked over and there was my niece's dead body. And in that moment, the only thing I could think as I rushed in to hug my sister, I was mad. I was so angry. It was radiating through my entire body because all I wanted to do was rush back downstairs and punch that woman in the face. I wanted to scream at her, how could you say such a thing? It'll be okay. It's not okay. So here's the thing. If one thing you get from anything that I say tonight is never tell somebody it'll be okay when they're going through trauma and grief, because you don't know. You cannot make that promise to anyone. Now, you can change it. You can change it with one word. I hope it will be okay. And that's it. That's all you need to do. And everything else is just about being there for people. So I know that this went down the grief path, but I want people to understand that these life things that we deal with are things that our children are going to be dealing with too. And if we don't set them up for that, not by taking away their burdens and doing those types of things, but rather by allowing them to process their own losses. Yes. So the one thing I will tell you, I did a TEDx talk last year, and I talked about loss in parenting. And at the time, my son was 4, and we had lost our cat before he turned 4. And he loved that cat. I mean, they were just peas in a pod. He would just pick her up and carry her all over the house. And she was like, whatever you want to do, kiddo, it's all good. And she was 19. Um, when I realized it was getting close to the end, I realized, okay, we need to prepare for this. And I bought a couple of books and we read them. When a Pet Dies by Mr. Rogers, It's Okay to Say Goodbye by Todd Parr, and Cat Heaven, because, of course. And we read them, and he asked me the tough question, will she come back? And I said, no, baby, she won't. And he said, that makes me sad. And he started crying, and I cried too. And I said, me too, buddy. And we allowed our feelings and our emotions for that moment. The kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. And he moved on a lot faster than I did. And I'll tell you this, it's that double burden you carry as a parent, because you're here feeling your own pain and you're feeling your child's pain. But I also knew he had to be able to cope with that and work through that.
Yes.
And these days, so every once in a while he would ask me about her, and these days now he doesn't talk about her as much, except to say that she's in I had a cat too, she's in cat heaven, and she's probably playing with her toys and da da da. He likes to imagine things. And he knows my parents are gone. They unfortunately did not get to meet him. And he talks about my parents being in heaven, and I said, well, and he asked me today, actually on our drive home from camp, he asked me, Mommy, is heaven in the sky? And I said, well, some people feel like it's in the sky and some people feel like it's all around them. And I feel like heaven's in my heart. And I had told him previously that, I always tell him my parents, they live in my heart. And so they're never really gone. And one day we had, and he said, well, in this car ride, he said, well, I think that the heaven's in the sky. And so we had this whole long, cute conversation about that. And, but one day there was a day where we were talking and I said something about mommy and daddy, one day we're not going to be here, and you're going to have to do stuff on your own for yourself. And I said, and somehow we got into this conversation where I said, and are you going to miss us? And he said, no. And I said, wait, what? And he goes, no, because you'll be in my heart.
Oh, he knew.
He
He
knew.
sounded like he was a very intelligent
He's a very
4-year-old.
intelligent 5. He's 5 now. He's a very intelligent 5-year-old. Yes, but
Yeah.
at the time he said that he was 4, and I was like, wow, that's
You
pretty
might have a
cool.
genius on hand.
He's listening. He's very smart. It's kind of scary. He's constantly keeping me on my toes. I'm constantly thinking, he knows when I work on some coping mechanisms with him and certain strategies that I use, he sometimes knows that I'm like, one time he was like, I don't know, 3 or something like that. And it was actually when we were going to camp, and the director was like talking to him, and she was asking him a question, and he suddenly looks out the window and goes, oh, did you see that bird? There's a bird out there. And she goes, he's trying to redirect me, isn't he? And I said, he was trying to redirect her because he didn't want to talk about the thing she was trying to talk to him about. So he knows what redirection is. He knows how to manipulate that circumstance of redirection because we've used it with him. So I'm like, all right, got to come up with new things. So now we do a lot of distraction. We do a lot of process quick and then distraction, and anticipation work. So yeah, but yeah, so that's my story in a very small nutshell. I'm also the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. So my father was a Holocaust survivor. So there's a whole long story there as well. And, I will tell you this, I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for the kindness, the true kind courageousness of absolute strangers. So, yeah. My father was rescued by complete strangers. So, who were just trying to do a good thing or trying to do a human thing. So
Yeah, lately I've been getting into watching a lot of movies from World War One, World War Two, and what the Jews went through. And I think it wasn't just the Jews; there was a little bit more
it
than that.
wasn't right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and then I don't know if you saw the most recent movie. from Anne Frank's story, and it just like I'm just like
Yeah.
it's sad that we still live in a world that has not changed that kind of mindset thinking. You know that
I have to agree. I mean, it pains my heart, but I would like to, in the desire to build emotionally secure people, I believe that that will also build a lot of empathetic human beings.
yes,
Because right now we're living through a time where there's a lot of apathy as opposed to
yes,
empathy. And I think that the interesting thing is humans are one of the few creatures on this planet who are actually hardwired for empathy. It's one of the reasons why we don't live in a strictly dominate or be dominated society. Our civilization has actually advanced to the point where empathy is a part of our hardwiring.
mm,
So it's not just the survival mechanism and dominate or be dominated, but empathy actually there's a huge piece of that that's actually predetermined as well. And what's very interesting is there are a lot of reasons why we do the things that we do today
yes,
because of our survival mechanism. And
yeah,
it's very interesting when you actually understand the depth of it, that some of the reasons why we so here's one for you. When people are look at other people who are different than them and they fear those people, there is a survival, it's because of a survival mechanism. Way back when we used to live in an age where it was literally survive or die, we had a an attitude of you walk into your familiar spaces, and if you see something different, that different thing oftentimes turned out to be dangerous to you. So there was a pattern that developed of both tribalism. Humans need to survive with other humans. That's just the way that we are born, physically incapable of caring for ourselves without somebody else. But the other piece of that was with the tribalism came the same is safe mechanism, which means like if something looks like me, therefore it's probably as safe as me. If this is a berry I've been eating for a long time, I know this berry is safe. A new berry, and then my friend eats it and dies, unsafe. And what started happening in the survival brain was new, different, unsafe. Fear that thing because of our amygdala would tell us fear different, fear something that's not the same as us. And what's happened over time in the course of civilization is that as we tribalized more and more and we found comfort in same, we also took this fear based approach to things that were different from us. So, people of a different skin color, people who don't want to live the same way we live, people of different religions, people of different races, different ethnicities, different. If it's different, it should be feared. Now, what happened though, as that was also occurring and we were becoming more civilized, is that people who learned and grew and started to actually recognize that, oh, there's no fear here, tried to change the minds of others and would get, you know, bopped back down. And so what happened is you have a collective of people who are afraid of something they do not understand because it's different than them, and other people who are like, open your eyes. You're safe here. This is safe. It's okay. You can mix with these other people who are different than you. You can accept that somebody wants to live a different way than you because it's not going to ultimately hurt you and it won't infringe on your survival. So, unfortunately, we've sort of regressed and we're in a pattern of regression, which is sad, but history is long. We're in a blip of time in reality. So when historians many, many years from now look back on this time, it's going to look like a very short period of regression.
mm,
And there's always regression before expansion. There's always a weird thing that happens. If you ever look in a lab, if you ever see things, there's an implosion and then all of a sudden there's an explosion of good, of progress. So that's my hope. My hope is that we're headed in the progression way eventually, but right now we're in a little bit of regression mode. So.
So is a lot of this, so correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this that you've been sharing is like a matter of your mindset. We as an adult might have to change our mindset, but listening to you, it sounds like you, in a sense, trained your son with his mindset so that
Right.
when he did redirection,
Hmm.
he did it in a positive way.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to worry about hearing anything that was negative.
Yes. That and so a mindset shift is actually a redrawing of your neural pathways. What's very interesting of that is that a lot of people think about mindset, but here's the thing. There is now, there's a lot of neuroscience around actually remapping your neural pathways. One of the most interesting things about the rewiring of neural pathways is grief. Grief actually rewires your neural pathways in a lot of different ways, but so can many other things. Big significant changes can rewire your neural pathways. However, they're starting to show evidence that you can do minor things for a longer period of time, which will also redraw your neural pathways. So let's just take a very simple example. What hand do you brush your teeth with?
Right hand.
Your right hand. Okay. For a week, try to purposefully brush your hand with your left. It's going to be really hard and awkward at first. It's going to feel really uncomfortable. Then try it for longer. Then try it for longer. Set yourself little tiny goals. Okay, I'm just going to try this for a week. When the week is over, it's still going to feel a bit uncomfortable, but you're going to say, okay, I'm going to reset now for another week. By the end of a good portion of, say, 30 days or so, it's going to start feeling more normal. What's actually happening in your brain,
You
that's
retraining
actually,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
changing the pathway.
Mm.
Yeah, it's actually changing the neural pathway that's been drawn in your brain that tells you you must brush your teeth with your right hand. Same thing as handwriting, right? It's very, I mean, we learn that from such an early age, so that behavior gets super ingrained in us. It's repetitive behaviors that will change your neural pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. If you want to utilize colloquial terms, it's a mindset shift, but it's actually a brain shift.
And almost in a sense, hypothetically, you would almost have to retrain your brain to always use your left, because
Hmm.
what if you lost your right hand? So in a
Yeah,
sense, you're forced to
yeah,
learn everything with your left that you used to
right,
do with your right. So, but you don't want to think of it that way. Oh, I'm going to
right,
lose my right hand, so I need to learn this way. You're just doing it because you just want to retrain your brain.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's an interesting way to
But
look at
but it's behaviors are just a set of patterns, a series of patterns that have
it.
been
Yes,
developed over time. So
yes.
we can change our behaviors. That's actually one of the few things we can change. I say this to people all the time. You cannot always control what happens to you. In fact, often you can't even control how you feel about that thing that happened. But you can rewire and rechange your behaviors. And what happens as a result is your behaviors do start to shift how you feel towards that thing that happened. So behavior pattern needs to shift first in order to help change your emotional stance on that thing,
Yeah.
how you feel emotionally about it. You can't just, if you're sad about something, you can't just tell yourself not to feel sad. What ends up happening is you live discordantly. Toxic positivity?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll work backwards for a moment. Have you ever heard of the emotional contagion?
I might have. I'm not
Okay.
positive. I have to rethink it.
It's like
Try to remember.
It's
Go
like
ahead.
catching feelings from other people.
Oh
So
yeah.
let's say you're online at a grocery store and it's taking forever and the person in front of you starts grumbling and you were like maybe scrolling for your phone, looking at some magazines, just standing there and like thinking about things. You weren't feeling rushed or anything. But the person in front of you starts grumbling and they're like, "Oh my God, this is taking forever. This is taking forever." And then they look at you and they make eye contact. And they're like, "Isn't this ridiculous? It's taking forever. Why is this person taking forever? This is, And suddenly in you start to feel a little agitation. And suddenly you're like, yeah, why is this taking forever? Oh my gosh. And you look at the time and suddenly you're getting more agitated. And then they start saying, like, why can't people just learn how to blah, 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 blah? And then suddenly you're feeling that way too. That's actually called the emotional contagion. It's how we influence others with the emotion we exhibit.
Yes, I now I'm remembering. Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
what's very interesting about the emotional contagion is you can be a social influence for change with an actual authentic emotional contagion. The problem with toxic positivity is it's not the real emotion you're actually feeling. Let's say you go into a space and you're like, I really hate my work. I hate my job so much, but I know I have to go there today. And you walk in and you put on a false smile. Hi, everybody. Yeah, hi. How you doing? Yeah, I'm here. And you're trying to be positive about it, but you really are unhappy. What happens is a cognitive dissonance. The people in the room, human beings can actually feel your real emotion, and it's not on display. So they're like, what's happening here? Why am I feeling this when the person is showing me this? Some of the most master manipulators do this too. Like I had an ex-husband who was very manipulative, and he was a really horrible person, and I felt like I was going insane because I was like, I'm not in my own right mind because I'm feeling this way, but he's telling me I'm not. And it was like this weird thing. So the same thing happens with toxic positivity. If somebody's trying to fake that they're happy when they really aren't, then they're the waves of emotion that they're actually feeding people are totally discordant, and you're going to say, and you're going to have an alarm bells ringing like, this person's totally fake. I don't feel right here. Something's off here. I was at a conference a few months back, and there was a speaker, and she was talking about some stuff, and she was like, she had this big smile on her face, but I kept looking at the person next to me, and I was like, yeah, something's off. And we were very much not feeling right about it. And I mean, she was trying to sell us on something instead of, I don't like to sell people. So I'm really poor at that, in fact. I would rather give value to people. So I just felt such discordance, and we were talking about it and unpacking it later, me and this other woman and a couple other of the other speakers that were there. And I said, I think that that was the situation. She was faking her uh,
Emotions.
emotions,
Yeah.
and what was underneath it was really what was the true feeling, and we were feeling that. And so there was this weird discordance with it. So I always say the better thing to do, if you are feeling nervous, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling unhappy, acknowledge that to your audience, acknowledge that to your clients, acknowledge that in a professional manner, and then move
Mhm.
forward, right? So now you've talked about the little elephant that's sitting on the in the corner of the room. And now people are like, oh, okay, I know what that elephant's about. Now I can focus on what the person's saying. But I say only don't, if you're really feeling a massive level of disconnect there, you should walk away. So let's say I had a situation where I was supposed to be running a group, and right after my brother died, I just couldn't do it. I could have gone, I could have run it, I could have done the technical aspect of running it, but I just wasn't emotionally capable of doing it. And so it's better to say, you know what, I need to acknowledge that this is going on in my life, and I deeply apologize, and would rather reschedule, because it's not healthy. And we are living in a world where there's something that's exploding right now. Back in the 70s and 80s, when the corporations started to really populate and really grow, massive growth levels of the capitalist attitude, there was a saying that they would say, check your problems at the door. The problem with that is, work is no place to bring your personal life problems. The problem with that is it's not realistic from a human perspective. It's not. And so now we're in a place where we're starting to recalibrate that. We're starting to understand that our employees are humans. And that means that some days they're going to come to work and they're going to have a big, heavy burden on their shoulders that's going on in their personal life. And they need to be able to unburden that thing in order to function at work. And if they have a supportive employment system, guess what? They're going to be much more capable of functioning with that thing. So one of the things I say all the time is like, for especially where there, if you have a corporation where you're employing parents, allow them the space to, settle in and to go from being parent role to being work role, and recognize that if something happens, they're going to need to deal with that because their child matters to them. So, if you are supportive of them, I promise you, you will get much more reward in return from your employees. They will be much more dedicated to you from a corporate system, and that is something I keep trying to teach corporations, because I'm like, you know what? Your employees are humans, first and foremost. Treat them like humans. You will get dedication, loyalty. You will get the
Yes.
desire to prove themselves to you because you're treating them like a human being and not a robot.
And one of the other things too that we can add on with that, and I'm glad you step in and help retrain that thinking in corporations. But also, when somebody's grieving, it's not our job, not the supervisor's job, not the manager's job, nobody's job to tell that parent who who's grieving that to stop it, get over it, because they're uncomfortable, you know, and they need to understand. Some people would never comprehend what it's like to lose a child and what it uh, does to us. It changes us. But the managers or the supervisors, whoever they may be, for them to step up and say, you need to stop this crying, you need to stop feeling sad, you need to get on, we got work to do, you're making everybody around you uncomfortable. And it's like, to me, I don't care if they're uncomfortable. I'm still grieving. And they should get the respect of being able to grieve. And it
Yeah.
might take a little while, but it's not their place to tell that grieving parent or whoever it may be that they need to get over it. It's time to move on. It's like you said earlier, um, grief, that kind of grief, there's no timetable.
There's no timetable for any kind of grief. And the truth is, here's the thing. Now, if your employer had come to you and said, I see that you're hurting, and you're also a valued member of this team. So, what can I do to support you and also help you so that you can recover well enough to work here, to be able to function here, and
Yes.
not need to leave this space? I want to make this space as comfortable as possible. Do
Yes.
you need do you need me to just hear you talk about your child for a little bit?
Yes.
Do you need me to hear you just talk about your parent, or just talk about the person you lost for a little bit? Tell me a little bit about them. And I tell you this too, so in the grieving process, one of the things for me is to tell people, you lean into what you loved about the person you lost. Tell me about that.
Yes.
Tell me about what lit you up about that person. Tell me all that, because I tell you that, again, that's the mindset shift. That's the thing. If an employer supports you that way and they give you that space to unburden that, right?
Yes.
Both the pain, but also then redirect you to what's positive. What did you love?
Yes.
Tell me some of those things. I'm going to sit here with you for 10 solid minutes, and you can just tell me everything about him, everything about her. I
Thank
want to
you.
hear
Thank
it
you.
all.
Thank you. Thank you. That's, um, I mean, is that something you do express in your workshops at the corporations, or is that
I am working towards getting more of the corporations to beneath that place, but it's really hard because lo- the end of life thought process is a very
yes,
hard thing for many people to acknowledge.
yes,
So I am trying to, little bit by little bit, turn that dial of recognition so that
yes,
they can start to realize, you know what? If I give you 10 minutes of undiluted time to tell me your favorite things about that person, you're going to have this weight lifted a little bit off your shoulders to be able to carry on and keep working,
Yes,
you
yes.
know?
And I think of what it is, in a sense, it's retraining or re-educating society, especially
Absolutely.
about grief, because they, in time, they become more, I hate to use this word, cold and hard, and maybe have no empathy, no compassion,
Yeah.
absolutely no sympathy. So it's a matter of, like you were saying, I'm glad how you said that and how you approach that, because that's what they need to learn in
Yeah.
order to approach the coworker
Yeah.
and and help them and everybody figure out how to embrace grief so
Yeah.
they don't become uncomfortable,
Yeah.
especially when somebody's grieving. So it's a matter of learning how to embrace grief and be there, be supportive, be
Yeah.
present. So
And
it's
I'll tell you this too. If you as a manager are listening, if anybody hears this who's a manager or who's a higher up is listening and they're like, but I can't handle that. That's too much for me. You don't have to take it on. You can. That is one of the reasons why HR is there. You, but if your HR can't do it, you can also have support services like myself or other grief counseling support services.
yes,
You can reach out to those places and say, listen, I don't have the ability to support you, but I want to. So let's make a plan. How about 10 minutes or even 20 minutes out of every single day you get to go into a separate room on a phone with a grief counselor and unpack some of the stuff. And
yes,
then and then you get another 10 minutes after that's done to like get it out of you, take a coffee break, and then come back to work. And then you've been able to now in the some of the because some days it's like if your work is really stressful, it's pushing on those stress buttons and it's
yes.
pushing the grief into exponentially harder places. So
Do
I think
you?
I told you this earlier, but one of the things that happened the morning that my brother died, I was actually at the State House in New Jersey giving testimony for legislation to give paid bereavement leave to people who've experienced an infertility loss or a child loss. Um,
Yes,
so it moved through that assembly and it's on to the next one. And we're hoping it's going to keep moving along. And then New Jersey will be
great.
one of the states to give paid
if we can
bereavement leave
get
for that.
every if we can
Yeah.
get every state to recognize that, because I remember, I think before Timothy died or something like that, and I was trying to figure out why we live in a world where there's nothing, there's absolutely nothing. But oh,
Yeah.
thank you so
I
much. And I know
yeah.
we're running out of time, so we're gonna have to do
Sure.
part 2 in the next few months, because
Sure.
you have so much to teach and to educate us, because I really, really appreciate
Thank you.
all that you shared today, because wow, my brain was like, yes, yes, somebody gets it. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So you want to tell us where we can find you, because I believe a lot of people who even if they're not here at the moment, but they will listen to it, they're gonna want to know, how do I get a? I see you have your website on there, so that helps.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you have
Footprints.
your website, so, and then you also have Facebook page.
I have Facebook page, I have LinkedIn, and you can find me on Instagram at Yarona Boster 1. But I will tell you that the easiest, best ways to reach me are directly through my webpage to click on like
Content.
find out more information, the contact, and
Yeah.
it'll go right into my email because that's like my primary place. So footprintscoaching.org. And like I said, yeah, footprintscoaching.org and LinkedIn and Facebook. But I will tell you through my email is my best. So that's the best way. And please, 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 if you're interested, if you're a parent and you're interested in learning more about parenting and just kind of digging in there, you can listen to the Evolution of Parenting podcast with myself and my co-host Robert Hulse. We're doing a 12-part series, a 12-episode series right now. We just dropped number 6, and number 7 will be out this coming week. And you can find it on Spotify, Podbean, Podchaser, iHeartRadios, and Samsung Podcasts. So.
You're not on YouTube?
And no, we don't do it. We don't do it video right now. It's just on listening mode. But we are
Okay.
considering that. We're thinking about that. I am on YouTube as well. Like I have my own thing on YouTube, but that's just a couple shorts that I put out, and I'm starting to slowly venture into that place too. I'm not really big about social media. One of my favorite things to do is to connect with human to humans.
Yes.
I love humans. And that's the thing that lights me up. Social connections, real social connections, not just through social media,
Yeah,
but
yes.
real human to human connections. This is what lights me up. So,
Oh my goodness. Oh my. Okay. Here's the human connection. I'm right here. You
yes.
know, I'm gonna. Oh my goodness. If it wasn't for time,
Yep.
I
I know.
still had the little bit questions that came up because you talked a little bit about the anticipatory grief, a tiny bit, but we already discussed the mindset. But also the other thing that you talked about was just being present when there's a loss. And if you don't know what to do, I teach this class how to become an effective comforter. So I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Norman. Oh my God, my mind just went blank on his name. Dr. Roman Wright.
Sounds
HW1. There's a lot of things you said that was in his book, and I'm like, she must have read his
oh,
book, but
I don't
his book is what to say or what to say or what not to say or what not to do and stuff like that. And
I love
I
that.
tell you, I love that book. That was the book that really got me going. And I am contact with him and his secretary, who I love to death. They keep letting me buy books from them so I can have my classes. And I use his book as a thing. And one reason is because I don't have my book out yet. But his book is absolutely wonderful. And if you
Um,
never, I mean, it's on Amazon, but it's also on Christian Books too, and his website. And it's a wonderful book to teach people who don't know what to say or don't know what to do, and it really, um, I use it as a guide of helping us to become an effective comforter. Because
yeah.
what you talked about earlier, it's
Hmm.
when you don't know what to say or do, but just be present. Because
Yeah.
sometimes action speaks louder than words.
It almost always does, in fact.
So just if you don't know what to say, but don't abandon your
Right.
your grieving friend or loved one. Just be present for however long it takes,
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
in time you're gonna find that you're gonna learn so much more about your friend or your loved one, and it's gonna be a wonderful thing. And I appreciate. Thank you, thank you, thank you
Thank
for being
you.
here. We're gonna have to figure out how to rebook you to come back for part 2 because I
Okay.
know you still have so much more. And I'm gonna go back and listen to your
Podcast, The Evolution of Parenting.
yeah.
Yep.
My mind went blank. I'm looking at you and I know what it
Okay.
is. It's just like didn't want to come out of my tongue for some reason.
Yep.
So that
That's
is
it.
just thank you for being part of here. You know, and stick on being with Global Grief Network because when we do our conference for 2024, we may be doing it in Vegas. I'm not sure, Las Vegas. I'm not sure. Um,
Okay.
you would be one of the most powerful speakers, and I'm
Sure.
going to make sure that I tell that committee you have to
Okay.
have her as one of the main speakers. Betsy Guerrero, Dr. Guerrero is another person I was trying to get going for our conference for next year because it's not going to be virtual. Well, it's going to be virtual, but it's going to be live, you know. And I think it's
Awesome.
so important for this kind of information that you're sharing, you know,
Yes.
either as a big guest speaker or teach it in a class. You
I
know,
would love that. That would be
it's gonna,
wonderful.
it's,
I do a lot of speaking and with my TEDx talk and my book coming out, and
oh,
I'm
that's
also going to be,
another thing I wanted to
yeah,
ask you. So
sure.
I'm sort of learning how to do the TEDx, and
Yeah.
from I think his name was Tracy. Um, Starts with a T, but he's a good-looking
Taylor.
husband. Huh?
Taylor?
Taylor.
Taylor?
He's good-looking.
Yep.
Anyway, he gave some ideas of how doing my, and I wrote it down, and I'm like, oh, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do, and I know I need to do it. It's just I had to get out of my own depression mode to get myself going. My
Absolutely.
health just went downhill, and it threw me off. But I keep trusting God. God, you know what's coming up. I don't, but I'm gonna have to trust you because I know that God's called me to do this kind of work. And I am so thankful for everybody I've met through Global Grief Network. You guys are just absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
So, part two
Part
with
two.
Yarona is going to come up. We'll let you all know because I'm sure she's got plenty of more information and resources that's going to lighten us up, expand our thinking, expand our learning, and everything. So, thank you so much. I really, really
Thank
did
you.
enjoy this, and I did learn a lot from you. And if
Thank
nobody
you.
else has, I'm sorry, but I have. You know.
I'm good. One person is a ripple effect. So
Yes, exactly. Thank you. You planted a seed in this podcast here, and I know it's gonna grow beautifully. So, thank you for sharing. And you know what? I do want to hear some more about your son because
sure.
just what you shared at the beginning about your son, I'm like, I'm in love with that boy already.
Speaking of, I got to go put him to bed. So
Oh,
that's my next thing.
oh, it's 8 o'clock already. Okay.
Yep.
So
Okay.
everybody, thank you for being here with Yarona
Thank
Boster
you.
sharing what she gave us a beautiful podcast. We learned a lot. If you missed it when we started at 7, it's gonna be on YouTube and Facebook when I'm done editing it. But meanwhile, um, and my mind just went blank. Come back again next week.
I will.
We're gonna have Michael, who's gonna come on. This guy is a photographer, and he's a stand-up comedian, but he has an amazing story of how he came to where he is now, and I think we're all gonna learn something new from him as well. But
Beautiful.
thank you, and tell
Thank
your
you.
little boy. Just say Auntie D wants to give you a hug.
Okay. No worries. I will.
And that I like when we have amazing little kids,
Yeah.
and you have an amazing little son, and you're doing
Thank
a good job bringing him up while he's young. I wish we
I still
parents.
make mistakes. Don't
I
forget that.
know,
That's
well,
important.
all parents will, but what I'm saying, it's amazing how you helped him to redirect his thinking and bring him up now and at that age. It's better now than later when he has to do much like the rest of us who still does our struggling and stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
thank you, thank you, thank you
Thank
for being a
you.
good parent and for being a good coach and for being a wonderful teacher.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody who came to the Unplugged Grief Ministries podcast today. And more to come. We have so many coaches in the next few months that's going to really come and teach and educate us. In the past, they told their stories. Now let's learn something new. And I'm all set up to be
Yay.
this eager student.
Thanks. All
Have a
right.
wonderful weekend and a good holiday. And again, tell your little boy, Auntie D sends a hug.
I will.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. And
Night.
thank you for being part of this podcast today. And happy weekend and happy July 4th. Bye bye.
Okay.